Welcome to another episode of the Devil's Rest Book Club, where we dive into the details of Christopher Rocchio's Sun Eater universe. I am your plebeian who is organizing the duel on my Palatine Lord's behalf, host Cameron. And with me today, as he as always, is the Palatine Lord defending his lady's honor in a duel to the death, Drew. Drew, how you doing?
I am doing great. Today we're going to be covering chapters 58 through 60 of the first book of the series, Empire of Silence, and we are getting to some of my favorite sections of this book.
So a lot of action, also a lot of good nuggets to talk about. Good thematic elements here.
Wonderful stuff.
Remind us where we left off as we step into our chapters today.
Yeah, so in our last episode, we discussed a small rebellion amongst the Umand that occurred with many of our cast members involved in it. After this small rebellion happens, Valka is sort of blamed for it by Gilliam Vas. He's very suspicious of her, which, rage's blindness and all that. Hadrian strikes Gilliam and causes us an issue and reveals his Palatine identity and challenges him officially to a duel. So a duel is now going to have to take place. The second chapter that we got in last episode is Hadrian going to Colosso to reunite with Switch and ask him to be his second so that this duel can be official and legally take place. And that is where we are sort of picking up, moving forward into these chapters today.
And we will begin with chapter 58, Barbarians. This is the first time post-Hadrian punching Gilliam in the face that Valka visits him. He is training with Switch in preparation for the duel, and Valka comes and accosts him and is furious with him as she pesters him, asking, why would you do this, essentially?
Mm-hmm.
She's also mad about the fact that she doesn't know who he is, right? That she's finding out, she thinks that he's this plutocrat, but finding out that he's actually a Palatine Lord and part of the system that she is frustrated with and that gives her a lot of consternation has got to be jarring for her and for us. And you've got to lose trust in that situation, right? For sure.
It's one of these things that was dividing them initially. We had earlier chapters discussing, being puzzle pieces that fit together, but we just didn't know quite how yet, and part of that disorientation was the fact that Hadrian couldn't be honest. And so in this moment she has both a sort of values disagreement about what's going on here. We know that she doesn't like violence and all this, but at the same moment she also discovers all this about Hadrian. So it's like a very confusing all at once experience. It's like kind of the opposite of the way that you would want things to gradually get unveiled. This is terrible timing. And that is going to result in some very angry Tevrosi stuff.
Yes, she basically starts by saying, who made you the defender of my honor, right? And she starts cursing at him and Pantai. There's a note as part of the rules that have been determined, and we'll find out a little bit more about, I guess we could talk about it now. Basically, the way that duels are set up in this world is both parties have to agree, and when you're in, you're in. There's no getting out of this duel. It's almost as if you're on trial and you're about to go to court, right? You have to make your duel date, and that is it. That's the only way that the system works. And Switch even mentions later in the chapter, talks about the idea that if you didn't have that commitment factor, people would duel each other more and then just get out of it some way or another.
Yeah. It's interesting that point is here. It's one of these things that negative things that appear negative may have a positive externality in that way. So if all of us were committed to our word, we would be very careful about what we said, for example. So it's an interesting paradox of why would you have conflicts that once engaged in have to play out? It was if it's that serious, then hopefully there's fewer conflicts in actuality.
Another rule that we find out later, we might as well talk about all the rules of this duel up front, is that the duel can have two outcomes, period, full stop. There are only two outcomes of any duel set up this way, and that is drawing first blood and ending the duel there, and only the person who is unbloodied can make that determination of whether or not the duel is over if they've gotten satisfaction, right, from the duel.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or death of the other party. It is first blood or it is death. There is no in between. I think maybe that there's some nuance about potentially the other person not being able to fight, but in most cases it means death.
Yeah. I think it probably does mean literally not able to. I don't think there's
Physically.
Random mercy. Yeah. And it's interesting, the idea of first blood granting the ability to say whether or not the duel is over yet.
Yeah.
That's it's an interesting decision that, the person who initially bests the other person now holds the power for the fate of the duel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure what the philosophy about that says, other than someone who is supposedly like more powerful in this situation has an advantage to really have a lot of control over what happens in the duel. There's probably like 15 downstream implications from that about who would challenge who, and like the risk profiles of this given who you're dueling, and there's a lot there. But all that to say, if you want to go into a duel and you want to not kill the other person, you have to be good enough to get first blood.
Yep.
Otherwise, you are at the mercy of the other person. And so it truly is like, you better really know your way around a sword, or you may just end up killed by someone better than you because you're
having to kill them, right? One of the
correct.
two.
Yeah. Yeah.
So going back to the rules as well, as I mentioned early on, the reason that Hadrian picks, and we talked a little bit about this last episode, but we get more color about the way that this works mechanically in this society, is the second is the one, the two people that are going to fight in the duel don't face each other. Like the moment the duel gets called, like they don't see each other until they go to that duel, which makes sense. You don't want them to kill each other before that moment because it's this very formal and officiated thing, and you have to obey the forms. Otherwise it doesn't count. The second's job not only is to be there in the event that he needs to fight in addition to, but it's also kind of a refereeing, negotiating position. So Switch meets with the second on Gilliam's side, which we assume is somebody from the Chantry, and is coordinating the rules and going into a negotiation on how this duel is going to take place and where it is going to take place. And so Switch has already done that off screen. We don't get too much on that, but we hear that this is like part of the way that this works. And as part of it, they are both sequestered from each other and under the watchful eye of a third party so that they don't get up and leave, right? They both are locked in. The moment they both challenge each other and accept the duel, they are locked into this, period, full stop. And there's only one direction. And so they are basically kept their eye on them the entire time. That's why the guards like basically said he only had an hour, like they're following him everywhere. For Hadrian, that's a normal thing. I imagine for Gilliam, this is abnormal. So all that to say, he's training, the duel's coming up, and Valka is asking him why he is taking this responsibility for her. She feels as if he is taking too much ownership in this situation, and that like he doesn't owe this to her, and she's trying to understand why he would do this altogether. Like what are his intentions behind this? Because from her perspective, they're colleagues and maybe friends, right? And clearly not good enough friends to know literally who he really is. So she's probably having a bunch of questions about who really is this person.
I think too, the values you have really determine how you view this situation. There's this idea of like honor and disrespect that is, kind of recognizable in our culture, but also different, right? If someone just like has like if we just plopped like a random Christian ethic here, right? Christian ethic is like conflict, turn the other cheek, you move on. Like if Gilliam misbehaves and is a jerk, he's hurting Gilliam. He's hurting himself through his own behavior and his own immorality, right? But if there's like an honor culture here, someone can damage someone's image, and therefore they require some sort of ability to repair that image through attacking or resolving the person who leveled the offense in the first place, right? And so it requires some sort of dueling structure like this. Otherwise, you have like people trying to murder each other or something like that to recover their image because of the image. And frankly, if it's different in Valka's culture, it seems extremely stupid from the outside of a culture like this to kill each other over someone else insulting us, right? It just like seems so childish and wasteful. But within the culture, it makes sense if the values are true. It's probably especially weird for Valka because she feels like it's done on her behalf. So like it's on behalf of an honor she doesn't even really like hold to the same way that someone in Hadrian's culture would. So it's like two steps of weird, because now it's like, not only am I defending my honor, I'm doing it on your behalf for a belief you don't have. And it's just many layers removed from her values.
So, and Hadrian mentions that like it was not his intention at the time to try to claim that he was responsible for her on this behalf, and probably because of what you're saying of like she doesn't have the same ethic. But that begs the question, and maybe we find out a little bit later. But what do you think his intention was in standing up at this moment? I think
I
he gets
think
more explicit on the page later, but I'm interested to hear if you think there's ulterior underneath.
I think it's a couple of things. Number one, I don't know if I believe Hadrian when he says I wasn't trying to take responsibility for you. I think he knows what she wants to hear and is saying it, although he actually probably does feel that. And I think we might get some evidence for that later on the page. I also think there's a secondary part of this is I don't think he has great control over himself and his temper, right? So there's an offense, when we have extreme, intense, impulsive anger reactions, often there is this sense that something has been wronged and we need to correct it.
Yeah.
So I think in truth, it's probably not very well thought out. He thinks, oh, this guy is doing this terrible thing to this woman. We kind of know a little bit about Hadrian's ethic around women, and he snapped and impulsively hit him before even thinking about it.
Yeah.
So it's possible that he wouldn't put that into words as I'm taking responsibility for your honor, Valka. But I think that is the ethic that motivated the impulsive action.
Which she immediately turns on him. In the midst of this, Hadrian introduces Switch to her, and Switch is like, hello, my lady. And Hadrian's like, she's a doctor. She's not a lady. Trying to cut her off from even saying that. But, which again, is proving her point even further, right? She can say that herself if she wants. She calls him a chauvinist, like calls the society chauvinistic. Like, why are you doing this on my behalf? And Hadrian, taking this way too literally, is like, oh, we're not chauvinistic. My mother once dueled over 2 women and a horse. It's like
yeah.
He doesn't see the point. He just thinks that the distinction is just male versus female, when she is saying that the whole honor culture, the institutional based ideal, and the way that they settle disputes is an issue, rather than the fact that it's just like a man defending a woman's honor in this particular case. And she even goes on to say like that violence isn't the issue for her. Like, if she could have punched him in the face if she wanted to, but that's not the issue. Like, that wouldn't have done anything. That wouldn't have solved anything.
Yeah, and it also takes the choice away from Valka, right? Like,
no agency.
It crams them all down a particular course of action, which is, why you wouldn't do this if it was thought through. But I don't think it was thought through. I also think, it's possible that women duel too, but I think if we're being honest, like, you've got like a couple of levels going on here, because I think Hadrian's culture is probably less like quote unquote chauvinistic than he is, right? His ethic is actually different. He feels differently about women, I think, than his culture does, right? People are much more casual about, sexuality and stuff in his culture than he is. I think he actually has a reverence for people. This is why he feels weird about Kyra at the start of the book and stuff. So,
or why he feels weird about Kat when he's with Valka.
Right. And he doesn't have like, this is sort of a strange distinction, but there's this idea of malevolent sexism versus benevolent sexism. Malevolent being like women are lesser because they're bad at certain things or something like that. Benevolent being like women are better in some ways, or we should have like a reverence for them due to their particular skill set or something like that. Some people view that as a positive thing. It's just a positive view about sex that's different or something like that. And Hadrian doesn't fall into the like malevolent category, but he might fall into the benevolent one where he has like a particular view. And so even if his culture isn't chauvinistic, he might be like a teensy bit.
Yeah.
Like, he is defending her honor here,
against her will.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
She like asked him like, what even is your name anymore? And Hadrian reminds her of his real name, Hadrian Marlowe, and he fingers the ring on his thumb, and he's playing with it, and we get a few glimpses into this in these chapters today. He feels different. Like, it doesn't feel like he is a Palatine. This is the first time in a long time that he's been Palatine, according to like let people know that he was a Palatine, and he almost has imposter syndrome wearing the ring again, because he's run away from his family, he forsook his entire life and his house. And so having the ring on, he's got a lot of feelings about it. I just wanted to point out that he mentions it multiple times. Then he goes on to explain to Valka why he was ordered to like call himself by a different name. Like, he was on the run. He was ordered to hide by the Mataros. And she's like, well, you're not hiding anymore. And then she like kind of pauses and blushes and like, I'm sorry, that was kind of blunt. And then Hadrian, in a moment of true self-awareness, apologizes to her and says, you know what? Like, my intentions weren't the best, like, in this. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But he doesn't defend, like, he doesn't He's apologizing for the way that it is impacting her and upsetting her feelings, but it doesn't come off the page to me that he's really upset with punching Gilliam in the face. Maybe the consequences of his actions, but the actual act itself, he defends to the very end.
Yeah, I think I think that's probably right. I think this resurfaces a little bit later in the chapter. I agree. I think he is genuinely sorry that he upset her.
Yeah.
I think that's true. Whether or not they could possibly resolve this disagreement is kind of different, because I think they generally view it differently. Yeah.
We get a distinction here. I think at a moment he says, and then Valka was gone, and then it was all Dr. Era. So there's this formality that goes on between him calling her Dr. Andera and calling her Valka, clearly, that's emerging on the page. So this is the first time it was literally said. I mean, the narrator has hinted at this kind of dynamic already by calling her Valka, but Hadrian in the story only calls her Dr. Andera. It's something we should keep an eye on as their relationship furthers on in the future, when he calls her Dr. Andera versus when he calls her Valka. That might give us an indication on the formality of the situation and where they are in their relationship.
Yeah, their closeness and their sort of casualness, and there's like a distance with the official title that isn't there with just the name.
Yeah, I'll use the Dune reference again. It's kind of Mentatish, right? You could sort of, or Scoliast-like, right? Where you can sort of like multiple personalities in that, putting that distance between you and the familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a Stoic ideal, I guess.
Yeah.
Switch introduces himself to Valka and says, my name is William. Actually, it's not Switch, but only there are too many Williams, which is, I think, is a small, funny, beautiful piece of world building for two reasons. One, we know that the princes have fiery red hair, and we know a Switch has fiery red hair. So like Switch is named literally after the emperor, one of the Emperor Williams, presumably William the 23rd. He's a plebeian, and William the 23rd is Palatine and of the, Aventine house, right? So he's going to live a long, long, long time. So meanwhile, Switch is not. He's plebeian.
Yeah.
So I love the world building little nugget of like, there's too many people being named William, right?
Yeah.
All these plebeians are naming their kid William after their god emperor, right? It's almost like being named Jesus or Muhammad, right? Like it's just
yeah.
You have to imagine that's the name William is pretty popular among the plebeian class. He then says they were trying to buy their way off world as they finish the story element of like, who Switch is. Valka tries to convince Hadrian and asks him if there's any way that he can back down. And like he's the Palatine. He should be able to do whatever, right? He has the highest station in the land. Why can't you just use your power in that way? Hadrian gets frustrated, and that the fact that she doesn't understand that there are still rules for Palatines that they have to follow. And probably from his perspective, more rules than she has to follow in her station. I guess she doesn't recognize how much formality there is in Hadrian's Palatine life and existence. And at that moment, he reveals like he was sold to the Chantry. Like he didn't have an option to do anything.
Yeah.
He can't do whatever he wants. His father determined his future, which is why he left. And coinciding with that, because this is a formal challenge, I cannot back down even if I wanted to. And I don't want to. This guy deserves to be punched in the face. This is like a trial, right? This is like a legal trial, like just like in Game of Thrones or whatever, trial by combat, or in any sort of fantasy story. The truth that comes out is not what matters as much as the outcome of the duel. The outcome of the duel determines the truth of what happened in the situation, really, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important here because this is, earlier we get an apology from Hadrian, and then here we get a defense of the action again, right?
Yep.
And he then says, like, I didn't like him calling you a witch. And so, we have him earlier trying to say, on one hand, he's not taking responsibility for her. And then we have him reverting back here. I think this is actually a good portrayal of what happens in sort of gridlocked arguments sometimes, is that we get sort of caught in bouncing between like wanting to apologize for the hurt we're causing, but really not changing our mind at all. Like we haven't resolved anything here. And so you sometimes see people having these arguments where they're just going in circles, when in truth, there isn't really anything to do other than to agree to disagree, because they're just simply a value disagreement that they're not going to get past here, right? Like she's not going to think it's okay for him to kill Gilliam because she was called a witch. And he's really not going to be like, yeah, all of a sudden I'm okay with it. And I shouldn't kill him. He still very much defends this course of action, at least at this point in time. So yeah, they're still going to butt heads about it. even though he doesn't want to hurt her feelings or break the connection here.
And to your point, he then goes on to say that the ethic is solidified, like from his perspective and his ethical view, duels are important because they limit crime of passion, murder situations, right? In other societies that don't have the duel, they may have to, if they're not satisfied with whatever justice system that exists, be forced to then take a gun and go murder somebody, right? That's the only course of some semblance of justice, rage or otherwise. It limits the potential for justice to not be carried out.
It's really hard. It's hard figuring this out, right? Because it can be a little bit of a self-motivating emotional reasoning thing here. We've got, so for example, in our real life country, we have capital punishment. We have the death penalty, right? There's a question about the ethics surrounding that. Something that people will say in defense of it is that without it, you will have revenge killings or something like this. And, it's a little unclear. Do you have duels to get some sort of sense of justice to release this impulse rather than it being done in a worse way? Even if that were true, if it were true that it decreases murders of passion, does that somehow make dueling ethical just because it means that people that want to kill people get it channeled in this more socially appropriate way? I mean, I don't think necessarily just because it changes some other outcome doesn't mean this particular course of action is okay. So even if this is true, I'm not sure that the ethics match up, although you could do some practical case for it if you're a pragmatist ethically. But yeah, I don't know. Who knows what it would be like in the Solon Empire without dueling. Maybe he does
say in particular that at least his justification in this moment is also to tamp down Gilliam from using tyranny against other people as well. So he sort of sees this beyond the defending of the woman's honor. And he's not saying this to her in this moment, although maybe he gives her a glimpse and is a little bit more honest on the page later. The narrator is giving us a glimpse into his head at the time of, well, duels are a better ethic because I can kill two birds with one stone. I can solve this dispute and this issue and defend Valka from being considered a spy, because if I win this duel, then the truth of the matter is settled and Valka's not a spy, right? The other side of it too is Gilliam has personally wielded his power tyrannically against Hadrian and presumably against other people. And so Hadrian, in this sort of white knight-esque way, is saying, well, I can use this to put him in his place. I'll show him who a true Palatine is, and I'll show the Chantry what they can go do by beating this guy up and winning and proving that I'm better.
Yeah, there's a sense in which Hadrian's on the opposite side of the Batman question here, right? Which is are you enabling evil by allowing it to persist in the world, or are you doing something wrong by allowing yourself to go to this level and killing someone to take them off the table? Does that change your moral character enough? Both sides, I think, call each other naive in some sense. The people that are saying, no, we shouldn't just kill people for the ends or something like that, think it's childish and naive to do the violence. And the people that do the violence think that you're enabling the existence of further injustice by allowing it to exist. And I think Hadrian's kind of grappling with that a little bit over the course of this section of the story.
So going back to the narrative, he basically says, I didn't like him calling you a witch. All right. Using that as that was the reason that I did this whole thing. Yeah. And we just did a lot of internal monologue for him. She pauses and doesn't answer and then looks at him, and man, this woman can cut him to his core. Says, yes, my lord. And whoa, does that jump off the page of she hasn't called anybody that in the whole book. She wields her words like a weapon.
Yeah.
And I wanted to read this passage on 411 immediately after she said, yes, my lord. Since I'd met the woman, she'd confounded me. Her foreign strangeness, those golden eyes, the skin like new vellum, the iron-jawed determination, the obvious intelligence, even her subtle cruelties. Whatever it says of me to admit it, she sang to me in a chemical language beneath and beyond poetry. Perhaps it was precisely because she challenged me. There was iron in her, and more than iron, adamant, such as starships are made of. High matter, my lord. The words rattled in my ears in spite of myself. My shoulders slumped, and I said, Hadrian. What? She hadn't heard me. Call me Hadrian. Whoa. The way that this passage in particular is beautiful for multiple reasons. One, it encapsulates everything that we've been talking about Valka and why Hadrian is attracted to her in one paragraph. And it's clear this guy's got feelings for he's so down bad that even when she's cutting him to his core, he's like, there is this chemical connection that I have with this woman beyond poetry in this super, super stressful, tense situation where I'm potentially going to die as a result of this. I could not stop liking her even if I tried. It is written into my genome.
Yeah, it's interesting here. I wonder if like narrator Hadrian is really mixed up in this passage, right?
Yeah.
There's him at the time, right, which is clearly smitten with Valka, but there's like this poetry of the old Sun Eater Hadrian, present here as well, of like just like she's almost like grown into like a like just like iconic figure in his personal history for some reason, where it's just like every time we get a section where he just has time to write about her, with the moment when he first sees her, how he hears the voice, and how there's this poetry about her every time she's talked about in this way. It's very clear if we're reading closely that this character means something, I think, for Hadrian, the narrator's like life, like not just for this time, or just for having fallen in love. There's something just way more significant about this character than any we've met otherwise.
And not, let's take woman by woman so far in the narrative too, that has taken his affections. His liking of Kyra is pure infatuation, right? Just physically attractive to him, and around, and somewhat close to his age.
Informative because of what she taught him through his mistakes, not because it's her, right?
But I mean, that was the base of his attraction, was purely physical and age related, because he didn't have very many peers and he wasn't, I guess, offered very many opportunities for marriage, and his ethic is different than that of Crispin's, right? So he's not doing anything different than that. So, physical attractiveness and availability were like the reasons that he was attracted to Kyra. The reason he's attracted to Kat is because of the sharing of dreams, the potential of dreams, and the ability to share a view and a fantasy outside of the life that they're currently living. That was his attractiveness to Kat. It wasn't anything beyond that. Valka meets both of those criteria and more. He's physically attracted to her. He shares a lot of common interests, fantastic or otherwise. He shares intellectual curiosity with her. Some ethics. They have this similar ethics in terms of the way that they view the Chantry, for instance, or the way that they view the treatment of Xenobites on this planet. Looking back now, we can really see that Valka has been constructed as, I've seen Hadrian like a girl physically attractive. I've seen Hadrian like a girl that meets some of his emotional needs. Here is the culmination of both and much more, because we haven't seen him interact with a woman as strong as Valka and as cutting. He gets, I won't say, is emasculated the right term? Like, he gets clapped back multiple times.
He's challenged by her. He's challenged because she doesn't like crap on men.
Yeah.
It would be like, she's not putting men down here. It's just like, she's putting women back up here with him. Like, she's on equal footing with him in a way that I don't think he's experienced before. It's really interesting,
Maybe not societally. That's a good point. That's a really good point too. This is the closest that he's had to somebody who intellectually, curiosity-wise, and in terms of rhetoric, right? Like, he's really good at talking. This is the first time that he's had somebody that can square up with him. That's a woman that they may not have the same social standing, but at least while he was a plutocrat, they kind of did.
Yeah. I do think there's something to what you're saying about the differences between Kyra, Kat, and Valka, and I think it's most clearly shown to me by kind of what you're saying, which is that Kyra teaches him something, Kat teaches him something, Valka teaches him something, but she's also like way more than just that, right? Like, she is individually important, and he is like just in love with this character in a way that he wasn't with the previous two. You're right, like, because the previous two are simply, he learns kind of shame with Kyra and changing his ethics and sort of his understanding of hierarchy and what that means. He learns
grief,
wonder again and grief from Kat. But then he like learns like really like what like love is with Valka. It's really, it's just she's different, and the passages we get like this are evidence of.
As she leaves, she starts using her favorite curse word, which is what we find out in this chapter, which is Imperials. I just love that. She like turns to Switch and says, "You better make sure this guy doesn't fucking die, because if he dies, I'm gonna kill him." It's just like, I love that whole thing of like anybody saying that you better not die or I'll kill you. Like, I love that.
It's just funny.
It's great. And she says
it's a trope that always is fun.
It's always great. There's never a time where it's like, "Don't you dare die or I'll kill you." I'm sure my wife has said that to me multiple times. It's just a very endearing turn of phrase. And Hadrian is like, okay. He turns this, she storms off, like looks at Switch. It's like, "What's this all supposed to mean?" And she's like, "Don't." Switch is like, "Don't die." And he was like, "Okay." And he's just sitting there with a practice sword. And Switch is like, "Go after her, dude. Like, what are you doing? Go after her." And so he leaves and he yells at Valka and catches up to her. And that's where the break that we get in the chapter, the second half of it.
I love the bro vibes being back between Switch and Hadrian. It just works. The chemistry is perfect. I'm glad that they're back.
Yeah,
I'm glad that they're back.
Switch is a positive influence in his life right now.
Definitely, yes.
Hadrian runs after her, says, "Wait," catches up. You know, they're in a different area of the colonnade. He's still in the palace facility. He's just not in the dueling yard anymore. He's sweaty. He's in exercise clothes. He says, "Dr. Ondera, please wait." So he's putting on that formality in this situation and gives an apology for hitting Gilliam because of insulting her. Like, he apologizes for not controlling himself.
You know, I think this is an interesting moment because it may tell us something about the broader story, potentially. And that is, we have seen, you know, with this moment when he hits Gilliam, he talks about like, you know, this like just righteous feeling he has when he hits Gilliam. It felt right. And then we have, after the fact, him sort of justifying it through his sort of ethical framework here. And I'm wondering if it's sort of alluding to this idea that, you know, Hadrian is going to tell us stories about why he's justified for doing the practical calculation of taking something off the board so that it doesn't hurt anything else. But maybe in truth, it's just that he can't control his anger.
Yeah,
and
that is the truth, right? That is our truth that we're seeing. And he's telling us that on the page, but he's trying, the narrator almost is trying to justify to the audience that he is more justified than he actually is. If we are taking that, immediately he says afterwards too, right? "Visions of Crispin unconscious on the floor flashed before me, and for a moment I saw him lying on the smooth marble between us." I mean, I don't want to speak to you. You can remind me if I'm telling you differently, or if I'm characterizing your opinion differently, but that was totally unjustified, him slamming the book into Crispin's head, right?
Yes.
That was a pure,
correct.
I cannot control my anger moment. And that is keying, the author, Chris Heracchio, is keying us in on the ideal that potentially, like, him hitting Gilliam wasn't all righteous, self-righteous. I mean, maybe Hadrian tries to justify it with his self-righteousness against the Chantry, against Gilliam in particular, for calling this woman that he's really attracted to a whore and a witch and a spy. But in reality, he snaps. Like, he reached that threshold and then just snaps.
Yeah, it wasn't a calculation.
No.
He just acted, right? And, you know, first of all, I don't even know if you get credit for the impulse, right? Like, if it were the right choice, but you didn't choose it, but you just acted impulsively, like, it isn't even really you. Your lack of control motivated you, not your sort of conviction for the position here.
That's right.
Yeah.
He brings up again immediately, right? Rage's blindness. And this is the first time we get the second half of this in the Gibsonism here. Calmness is sight. And so we've heard Rage's blindness up to this point. Calmness, sight. That makes sense as sort of a mirror thing. And the thing that kicked up, the image that kicked up for me when thinking about this is, imagine you are at, there's stories of divers doing this, for instance. So imagine you're in the water in a cave or whatever, or any sort of body of water where there's sediment on the ground. If you kick up all of the dirt and sediment in a rage and fury and fear and whatever, you can't see because all the sediment is kicked up. You're physically blind. Compared to if you're calm and everything is settled at the bottom, you can see in the water itself. It's kind of an interesting image that came to my mind when reading this as a mirror. But is this correct? Like, is this ethic valid?
Yeah. Well, you know, rage is this, you know, activated, dysregulated emotional state. And when we get into this place, our lower brain, sort of lizard brain reacting mode, which is a very not, conscious action mode. And, the blindness here is just like sort of a lack of control. There's no foresight. We just end up doing what our body tells us to do because we're enraged. The calmness is sort of a demonstration of control. We have the ability to access our prefrontal cortex, make decisions, use our fine motor skills more deliberately. It just means we have more ability to see into the future and make decisions, right? And so there is something to this, this dysregulation is blindness, but regulation is sight, right? We can make actual decisions. So yeah, I think the ethic is correct.
That makes sense.
In real terms, yeah.
I wanted to read this part of 412.
Yes.
Continuing on from rage is blindness, the scholiasts say, calmness sight. They eschew anger as they eschew all extremes of emotion, mud in the mind's clear pool. Perhaps it is as good I never made it to Tukros, to Novsember. That old dragon, fear, lay at the root of it all, mothering rage and all the rest. Fear, death to reason. But why was I afraid? What was it about Valka that took familiar feelings and turned them strange as the stars in Imesh's sky? So one, the narrator is letting us in on ultimately at the bottom of whatever is here is fear. Anytime the rage is blindness is coming up, most of the time fear is mothered to that emotion. Like even before, we've talked about the emotional iceberg. If anger or frustration is at the top of the iceberg, then there's a lot of feelings underneath. Most of the time it boils down to fear, right? In that sort of heightened emotional state that we experience as rage or anger. But I did want to talk specifically about some world building things that we get dropped here in the midst of this dialogue that this monologue that he has. He never makes it to Tukros. Never makes it to Tukros. So we get confirmation here that like that whole arc of him becoming a scholiast, going to Novsember, not only like does he not get the letter or whatever, and we can assume that happens. The narrator is telling us in this moment, I never ended up going to a scholiast Athenaeum and becoming a scholiast, a true scholiast at Tukros. So I thought I wanted to point that out of like, okay, well, where's our story going to go? How are we going to get to our destination of blowing up the sun? We know that becoming a scholiast isn't part of that, or can assume that up to this point.
Shocker, yeah.
Yeah.
Scholiast blowing up the sun. That would be a story.
That's rage's blindness for sure. He apologizes again for taking away her. He does this in this weird way of like, I was going to be a diplomat and I was going to blah, blah, blah. Like he's like almost putting himself on a little bit and trying to make himself more important than he was. But then he admits that like I'm sorry for like taking your autonomy away, your agency away in this situation. Valka then immediately turns it back on him and says, you know what? If you would have just left this all alone, nothing would have happened. And this would probably have blown over by now. The idea of me being the spy or whatever, and like we would have moved on already had you not intervened. Like, do you understand that? It's almost as if Hadrian punching Gilliam in the face has made it more of an issue and has made it more high profile and has put her under the microscope of the Chantry even more than she was before. So it's not like she's hinting at the fact that whatever you wanted to do has had the opposite effect. Like, do you understand that? Hadrian maybe says the words, but with his actions on the page is not giving us an indication of that.
It's an open question to us. Maybe it's worth us thinking about as readers, who is actually right here. Maybe it's true that Hadrian acted impulsively. But what do we think the outcome is if Gilliam's suspicion continues? To give Hadrian play devil's advocate for him here. He's getting increasingly suspicious. He's pushing harder and harder for something to be done to her. He's got a specific thing to attack her over. It's possible that, like the Count isn't going for it. It sounds like he wasn't, but his mom, who knows? Like it's, I think it's an open question, like it's easy to sit in Valka's position and say we shouldn't have done anything, but like you're messing with the Chantry and a crazy person, like it's who knows?
She says her arguments against that though is like they would have, if they really thought I was an issue, they would have thrown me in the dungeon, tortured me, whether I was a diplomat or not. They would have made me disappear, and it would have been an issue already. And on like to your point though, maybe they were suspicious of her just because she's Tavrosi and has a connection with Ted. They are suspicious of her purely because she is Tavrosi and has a different relationship to technology and isn't under their control. That being said, Gilliam is on higher alert because Hadrian is talking Cielson to the Cielson, right? Like these are Hadrian's actions that are putting her under more suspicion, even before punching Gilliam in the face, that we get more indication of, right? This could have blown over and could have been handled way differently had Hadrian. I mean, he couldn't have known. He didn't know who she was, but his association with her and his association with the Cielson, that's also raising the suspicion on her.
That he is raising her profile for sure. I will say it's possible, if they just wanted her dead, they would have killed her a while ago or something. But that is pre-Umand revolt, right? We were talking at the start of the book of like, if we buy too many like mining machines, then our planet might get glassed, right? So like not exactly the most rational actors here. And we're talking about Gilliam and his mom. So all that to say, like it's possible that it would have blown over. We just don't know because Hadrian has forced us down this line now. And so it's an open question. And this is the problem of action versus inaction. We don't get to live in counterfactuals. We make a choice and we don't know what would have happened if we didn't do it. And Hadrian has a bias towards action. And so we're just going to have to see. Yeah.
And that's her issue, right? Later on the page, he's still, even in this moment, while he's trying to apologize for taking agency away from her, says, but, right, like this is the terrible way to apologize if you're trying to apologize to somebody, is apologizing for making them upset about something and then trying to justify your actions doing it, right? Like not apologizing for the actual action and what was behind it, but rather the fact that it made somebody upset. He said, somebody had to do it, dude. Somebody had to punch him in the face. And she's like, somebody didn't. I did. I was the one who had the right to do that. You did not. And Hadrian just like clearly does not even, like, he's tried to apologize to her like 3 or 4 times on the page already, and clearly does not understand the gap between their ethics here, right? He understands why she's upset. He is not apologizing for that at all. He's apologizing for her feelings and not for his actions.
He keeps trying to convince her. Like he keeps trying to say XYZ thing. It's not going to win here because they just have too deep a value disagreement. It would require either someone to change their values or them to just decide that they have different values and they're going to try to understand each other and move on from this. He openly denies that fighting doesn't solve problems. He's like, it totally can solve a problem here. Like he's like, I can take Gilliam off the board, and then Gilliam doesn't get to do anything anymore.
That's kind of true.
It is.
It's not good. I mean, it's not a societal good to solve problems with violence, right? But I mean, we're seeing it play out in our world today, right? Like there's arguments on all sides of the foreign policy spectrum on this particular issue. But sometimes fighting does solve higher order problems. And this is just a Tavrosi versus Solon thing, right? That they will never get over between the two of them. But I did want to bring up this quote on the page where he says on page 413, after she says, no, because fighting doesn't solve anything. He says, who told you that? I demanded, genuinely nonplussed. If you fight to solve a problem and win, that problem is solved, Valka. Let's stop there, right? In the ethics of this society, in this duel, that is true, right? If Hadrian goes in and wins this duel, then the problem is solved and this issue won't be brought. There's no double jeopardy for this one particular issue. Theoretically, I guess if Gilliam could challenge him again for some other event or offense or whatever. But in that society, in their laws, if he solves the problem by winning in this duel, the matter is settled. So that's one side of it. Then he says, I didn't know what I was saying, but if I had, it might have saved me a lot of pain when the war came or when I came to the war. What? So we need to remember this moment of if you fight to solve a problem and win, that problem is solved. The narrator is keying us in on the fact that like, that may be true in this situation and legally, and that may be true in reality, but I'm going to suffer a lot for this in the future.
This is the Hydra problem, right? Yeah. Which is like, you've solved the problem, but then the Hydra grows 2 more heads, right? And it's like, it's actually really unclear to me, like, which ethic is correct here. I think this is part of just grappling with, like, being a human being. Like, do you take the guaranteed win and risk it turning into a bed of snakes, or do you try to negotiate and move forward, but then you risk placating or enabling? It's a really, really hard problem to figure out. And it takes like sort of constant thought about it. I guess that, the thing that really is highlighted to me here, if we're thinking of the ethics of it, is that it's a complicated choice and reasonable people, I think, can disagree. But I think Hadrian didn't make a choice. And
Yeah.
I think that that's part of the problem, is that there was no decision made here. There was an impulse had here.
Yeah.
And we're doing, I think, a little post hoc justification for what ultimately is an impulse. So
we get, and to your point on that in particular, the author agrees with you. And I'll argue that he agrees with you by this reference that's immediately said after that. And you've created 7 new problems that you have to deal with, she says. To which he responds, 77 new problems, I agreed, but you keep fighting because if you can choose when to fight, you have some control. If you bury it, let it fester. I shook my head. Gilliam's done nothing but threatened me since I got. So that like 7 problems and 77 problems is a direct reference to the biblical story of Cain and Abel, right? For our readers who may not be religious or may not understand Old Testament stories, this is a pretty popular one. The children of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, are participants in the first sort of murder, right? Abel has an offering that God enjoys. Cain does not. Cain kills his brother out of jealousy and spite, out of rage, being blindness, and becomes cursed. God puts a mark on him, and he leaves the land of Eden into the land of Nod. And in Genesis chapter 4, verse 23, Lamech, who is another character later in the story, Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. Cain's revenge is 7-fold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. And that's a reference to like, when God puts the mark on Cain, anybody who kills Cain is going to have the revenge of Old Testament God 7-fold. And then 77 for Lamech. So like the fact that the author is king is in here is like 7 new problems and then 77 new problems is indicating to us that this cycle of violence is only creating new problems.
It's like a multiplication effect of like making things worse and worse.
That's right. So the author is subtly keying us into the idea of that ethic is a reality, but Hadrian may not agree, but you don't do that, right? Like an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind in this situation, or 77 times dead.
Really good catch.
Valka then is like, okay, but does that give you the right to like murder him? And then Hadrian's like, this is not murder. It's a duel. It's different, right? This is like sanctioned. It's a formal duel. It's not murder. And from Hadrian's perspective is like, I can't let him continue to walk over other people. I'm the only one who could challenge this guy and get away with it. One, because I can beat him, and 2, because I'm Palatine. And not only that, he's an Intis too, and he's protected by the Chantry. He's about the only Chantry person that I could probably get away with hurting and be okay.
Well, it's interesting too, because like it's possible that Gilliam never would put himself in a position to be challenged formally by another Palatine, because he wouldn't have leveled such an insult towards a Palatine potentially.
He sort of sees the Palatine. He's grafted onto the Palatine class and has such a reverence for him. But the idea, and to him, like Hadrian is so suspicious, even if he may look Palatine, there's no way a Palatine would act the way that Hadrian is acting in Gilliam's mind, right? Hadrian gets asked by Valka again, like, who even are you? Like, who am I even talking with at this point? And he like tries to explain to her, like, I am Hadrian Marlowe. Like, there are parts of me, my interests, like there are parts of me that were definitely me. Like I wasn't lying. It's literally just the backstory in the name, like who I am as a person, the ethics that I've talked about as I have with you. I believe all of those things, like everything that we've talked about. I believe that. And that's true, right? Like his interest in the Xenobites is all him, so much so that it has gotten him into so much trouble, right? Like going and talking to this Yeltsin has put him in this weird and yet difficult position that he's in now. And then they postulate why Bailey and Matar. There's an interesting part at the end of the chapter where Valka is like, why didn't he just turn you in to the Chantry or to your dad? And Hadrian's like, I have some theories. He doesn't tell us what these theories are on the page. But he's like, I have some theories. When you read this the first time, did you have any inclination or idea on why Bailey and Mataro? Presumably all that we know right now is like messing with the Chantry is dangerous, and Bailey and Mataro doesn't mess with the Chantry unless it's Ligeia, right? Like that's the only Chantry person he messes with. He doesn't want to mess with anybody related to the High Collar or like Vesperad and where the Synod is.
Yeah, if I'm honest, I wasn't reading closely enough to really consider and think about it very much. I think it was, intuitively I knew that there was the Chantry element, but I didn't spend a lot of time, postulating. I was flying through. I'm like, I gotta see this duel. This is part of the reason I'm excited to do this reread is because I get to slow down and think a little bit through. It is a big question mark that's been a little bit more subtle. Like what exactly is going on here? What kind of plans does the Count have?
Yeah,
and hopefully we get to see a little bit about what actually is going on here soon. If Hadrian's theories are correct, should he voice them later in the story?
She then calls him out saying like, you know what you've really done here, Hadrian. This is the first time that she uses his name, right? I think it's the first time she calls him Hadrian in the entire story is in this moment. She says, you know what you've done, right, Hadrian? I'm sorry. I looked up sharply from an examination of my hands. You made this happen, she said, then clenched her jaw tight around the next words. You made this about me. Someone's going to die because you needed to prove what? That you're a man? That you're a fighter by the gods? No one doubts that. She grew momentarily silent, her eyes fixed like a corpse on something beyond the mortal world. I don't want anyone's death on my conscience. I don't want anyone to die because of me. This is her concern. Right?
Yeah.
Is she did nothing wrong in this situation with Umond and afterwards. And potentially either Hadrian or Gilliam can die as a result of something she had no control over. And that doesn't sit well with her at all.
I will say, I think, people do this all the time where they take responsibility for things that really aren't them. I understand intellectually what she's saying. If Hadrian walked in and just shot Gilliam's head off, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is not on Valka. Like that was 100% Hadrian's choice. It's very easy to confuse. Like if someone says they're doing something on our behalf, they can say that, but it isn't as if they've made a choice in actuality for you. Emotionally, it often feels that way. Like I understand exactly why Valka would feel that way. It's a little bit of a confusion. It's taking way too much responsibility.
Yeah.
Other people's actions are not our actions, even if they say that they're for us or something like that.
Yeah, but it is her honor, right? Like,
but she doesn't even believe in that, right? Like,
right?
so,
she doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
But from her perspective and her ethic, she's an accomplice, right? To some extent, at least in the way she is taking responsibility for Hadrian's actions that aren't related to her.
Yeah.
But she still sees it as like kind of her causing this whole thing.
Yeah.
Hadrian then keys her in on the idea that, well, nobody has to die. Like, I'll draw first blood tomorrow. I'll vow I will not kill him tomorrow. I don't want to kill anybody. And from what we know, he didn't kill anybody in Colosso, right? He didn't kill anybody in Colosso.
Yeah.
He just disabled gladiators' armors or beat people and like had them submit to disarm them, Zorro-esque, like superheroes type stuff. So he thinks that that's what's going to happen here. In this situation, he'll draw first blood, he'll call off the duel, and nobody will die. I don't want to kill anybody either. And eventually, at the end of the chapter, Valka looks at him after he asks, I don't want to kill anyone, Dr. Andera. She responds, Valka, she said at last, call me Valka. So mirroring, call me Hadrian, call me Hadrian instead of Marlowe or Gibson or whatever.
Yeah.
She's now extending the familiarity to him, indicating that there is okay, that's fine. There's a potential for this relationship to be salvaged and move on from here. And that's where we end.
Totally broken.
Chapter 58, which we spoke way too long about, but there's so much there. We love all.
Yeah, I think we'll move quicker here. We got a short chapter and then some action.
Chapter 59, on the eve of execution, just mirroring what we saw with night before the group engagement. Right? Every time Hadrian is about to go into a physical combat with somebody else that he knows and is anticipating, there is anxiety that sits there. Like he wasn't able to sleep that night. He is kind of experiencing the same thing here in this short chapter. He starts by saying, have you ever been made to face your own death, reader? By violence, illness, by ever-fleeting time? You will, but I pray that you have not. Pray that you will never face it as I did that lonely night, by appointment. So it's this idea that like, if you know, it's different. I mean, we get a glimpse of that with like tests and stuff like that, or the Sunday scaries before having to go to work, for instance. But if it's a true life or death situation, that anxiety sits way, way higher on the scale. Right.
It's one of these things you can't think your way out of the very real problem that you might die tomorrow. We can do a lot of things to try to manage worry, anxiety. A lot of it's produced by irrational thinking and the way that we're thinking about things, but it's pretty rational to be worried about dying for a lot of folks.
100%.
You can get crazy stoic about it and like even step away from that. But like for most of us, that's not going to be achievable. You know, a lot of us are attached to our own lives. To anticipate something that serious is just, it sounds kind of like its own kind of hell, you know, that Hadrian is not wishing upon the reader.
Again, we get this image. We get some interesting images in this chapter. One that I wanted to point out first is the personification of death in this moment is female. And this might be tied to like the idea in the world of the Sun Eater being a theological society that worships Mother Earth. But if you look at it, it says, and yet death seemed near at hand, her breath a silver mist upon the alum glass of my window. So I thought that was interesting that like normally in our society, death is sort of the Grim Reaper, right? Like black cloak, and
I think his chapters might be significantly different.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Where is that line for you?
On 4:16, I knew that I might die the next day. It did not seem likely. It did not seem possible that the Intis priest should pose any serious threat to me, Palatine trained and Colosseum hardened as I was. And yet, still death seemed near at hand. Her breath, a silver mist upon the alum glass of my window. I did not sleep, but counted the seconds of my life like grains of sand. Like grains of sand, watched them slip all through my fingers, each one never to return.
Huh. Very, I don't even know any of that is in my it's very different. There's another situation here that I wanted to ask you about in comparison. I see you stand as does the solitary candle in a chapel flickering against the dark with a capital D. I wanted to see if this is in your version.
Okay. There's a lot, and that was what I was going to bring up next. The dark that we mentioned and we discussed during the Omand siege, that when he's getting choked out, is capitalized again here. It is one thing to die, quite another to face death and live. I wish neither for you, I who have suffered both. What the actual heck does that mean? Let me read that again. It is one thing to die, quite another to face death and live. I wish neither for you, I who have suffered both. So he is saying here explicitly on my version of the book in this page that he dies.
It is one thing to die, quite another to have suffered death, the fear of death and survive. I wish neither for you who has suffered both.
I who have suffered both.
Yeah, so that's different in your version. I who have suffered. So that's a big thing here. So what does that mean?
He's saying he dies, but he's writing this as if he's alive. How does that work?
Yeah.
Insane. Okay. And only something that you'd pick up if you're reading like as closely as we are. That's really strange.
Yeah.
I saw my life, myself, as a solitary candle flickering against that capital D dark.
Interestingly, in the previous chapter, in the section that we mentioned earlier about the Amon, I'm remembering that in my version, we got a capital D dark, and in your version, we got a howling dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in your version now, we have a capital D dark. We'll have to return to what the heck howling dark means, but it seems like there's some capital D dark thing happening
other than the second book in the series, which people will know. As a solitary candle of that future which must come and which shall continue on without me. That's crazy. Like, what does that mean? Dying, like I who have suffered both death and facing death and living. I don't know. It's insane that he brings that up. I just wanted to point that out here. And to tie back, like you said, to that capital D dark, there's something definitely going there. For the candle flame to be extinguished is no tragedy. The candle knows not when it is blown out. It is only a symbol, only the avatar of that unconquered sun lit to mark the watches of the night. The human flame knows and shivers not in the wind, but in fear of, again, the capital D dark. Like, we're getting a lot of this image of this capital D dark. And in this moment where he is contemplating his death in the future, I did want to bring up this image, the Simurgh, that comes out here, reborn from the fire. The Simurgh is a Persian mythical bird of prey type creature that has a bunch of powers. It's like a phoenix, but has more powers in Persian mythology. And it sort of has this same sort of ideology of rising again from the ashes of death imagery. We get in this chapter as well more world building, like end of the story world building. He says, I have made many mistakes and done great evil. For 1,500 years, I have haunted our galaxy, gathering regrets. Perhaps Gilliam deserved to die. He was not a good man. He was wicked, petty, cruel, as nature had been cruel to him, as others doubtless had been cruel too. I no longer believe that any man may dispense perfect justice. I have met saints punished for their virtue, seen monsters rewarded for their crimes. I have been both sorts of creature. So, whoa, what the F does that mean? So not only, one, we find out Gilliam dies. We could probably assume that the fact that like Hadrian continues on in the story that he beats Gilliam, but we get confirmation on the page that he dies, right? Perhaps he deserved to die. He also tells us that he's been around for 1,500 years.
Yeah, huge, like
1,500. Does that mean like alive fake 1,500 years time? That's impossible, right? Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, Palatine's that we've seen, what, 500-600 years, 7 maybe?
Something like that, yeah.
This is double that time.
Yeah. These chapters where he just starts going off are really crazy. They show us a lot about narrator Hadrian.
Yeah.
And his sort of reflection about the time period he's describing.
These are big bombs being dropped in this chapter. Like
definitely.
I want the listener to understand, like, these are some huge bombs that are being dropped so far, based on what we know, having just read on the page and discussed with you all that are listening to the story. The fact that like he goes on to be around at least 1,500 years into the life of this empire, that he says that he faces death and lives and also has died. He then goes on to like have this conversation about the soul, right? Like it this is a very existential moment for him, and it's very easy when you're dealing with and thinking about the eternal, whatever it faces us at the big question, right? Whatever happens after death, and what do we face, and what is immortality? What is the idea of the soul? He begins his own tirade, again, reminding us, and this is different. I guarantee you it's different in this version compared to yours. Not long ago, I wrote that I had once considered myself agnostic, but I believed even then that men must have souls. To believe otherwise, to believe that man is only an animal, that thinking thus permits men to treat other men as animals. Such thinking, even in our neighbors, blinds us to the ugliness of the world, teaches us to permit evil as the mean and ordinary thing it is, teaches us tolerance, for man not need tolerate what is good. Whatever Gilliam Vas was, and there was but little good in him, he was a man like any other, not evil, not truly, not only. So that says a lot of things. One, he believes, even when he's an agnostic or not a believer in the Chantry's religion, he believes in this sort of embodied or eternal soul that exists. And I wanted to take a detour and talk about this in particular, the idea of the soul. It's a very Western thing. I should start by saying, like, the idea of the embodied soul is a Near Eastern and Western ideal that really comes about in probably 5th century BC with the classic Greek philosophers, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle are sort of posited and given this like ideal of the philosophical underpinnings of what soul is, the eternal soul that is in man. The word soul in Greek is actually psyche, which is what we use the basis of psychology and of our psyches individually as humans. But that word psyche, and this probably ties back into the sort of Near Eastern Judeo-Christian ideal of it as well, means breath or the animating force behind that. So maybe there's an even deeper Near Eastern religious ideal that is being talked about here. But the Greeks sort of are given the credit, at least from the philosophical angle, of like Plato's tripartite soul is one of the first ancient documents or ancient philosophical arguments on why man is different. But the point that the narrator is bringing up here is really to talk about the fact that, like, if we don't see dignity or the breath of life or the soul in our fellow man, man can be wolf to other man, like he's mentioned in chapters before.
It very clearly seems like narrator Hadrian is like kind of condemning young Hadrian here. You know, like there's something about this saying, like, you know, looking back, you know, even Gilliam wasn't all bad, and there's this discussion about, you know, what maybe Gilliam deserved to die, but there's still a part of him that shouldn't have, or something like that. There's this ethic that seems clearly incongruent from the chapter we just received from young Hadrian, sort of talking about, well, we just gotta get him off the board. It's a very different, it feels like we are discussing regret for what we're about to read in this chapter. Yeah.
Not only that, he also like admits that Gilliam is more the condemnation of the actions, sure, but he's also saying that like even Gilliam, who is a piece of shit, right? Like Gilliam's a piece of shit. I don't have any compulsion saying like issues saying that Gilliam's a piece of shit, but any man has the ability to be more than being a piece of shit. They can be redeemed. They can't. That isn't the sum of all of Gilliam. He goes on to say that, like, I don't believe that Mother Earth answers prayers, but I've seen my own prayers answered in my time. What does that mean? And then he goes on to end the chapter basically saying, like, if God does exist, he alone might be the only one to dispense perfect justice. He ends the chapter saying, judge me as you will. I pray what gods there are, forgive me, and have mercy on Gilliam's poor soul. So this is Gilliam's obituary that's getting written by the guy who killed him.
Yeah.
Which is insane. Looking back on this, like, I don't remember this chapter at all from my first read through. Reading line by line and taking it as slow as we are, clearly Hadrian kills Gilliam in this next chapter. Clearly. And he kind of feels bad about it in the future.
It's interesting. Yeah, it makes me wonder, one of the things that can be done for negotiation or conflict resolution is that if there's something hard we have to say, we can caveat before we say it to get in front of any negative reaction, right? So like if I have to do a difficult confrontation, I might say like, this is going to sound like I'm being critical. Let me finish what I'm saying. I promise that's not my intention. I have a point for what I'm going to say to try to disarm a little bit. It's like almost like maybe Hadrian is stepping in here like, hey, wait a second. Like, this is not good. I don't agree with this.
Yeah.
Like it's like it feels almost like he has to preface before what we're about to read about. Yeah, this is an in-universe document. There may be readers in this universe who are like, oh, this is the part where evil Hadrian does XYZ, and this is Hadrian stepping in to defend himself before we get to that part of the story, maybe. Interestingly enough. It could just also be an authentic expression of regret or something, but who knows?
Yeah. But that's where we end chapter 59, and we pick up with chapter 60, The Sword, Our Orator. Readers will be reminded that the Sword, Our Orator are the words of House Marlowe, and Hadrian will show us why. The duel is about to happen. And again, coming out of that really morose chapter, he begins by saying, there were worse places to die. I just tightening my brown dueling jerkin. This duel has been placed in this really beautiful garden. He is in a garden with a bunch of flowers that are huge, that like whose bulbs are like head size that open and close. Looking down on him in these grottos on each side of this dueling field is blind justice, female blind justice, wide-eyed fortitude, and death herself. So we get three images of these personified, anthropomorphized ideals that some of which are familiar to us, more blind justice, but that are looking down upon this duel and are wishing them justice, fortitude, and like death are presiding over this event. The garden itself is kind of fey-like and has fairy-esque features, and he remarks that it reminds him of like the kind of place that Cat would have wanted to see on Lewin.
Mm-hmm.
Hadrian, going into this fight, we find out, is already still wounded from his fight with the Umand. Like, no matter how well they were given medical attention in advance of this fight, he's still coming in there not 100%. And at least at the beginning of the fight, Valka isn't there yet. Then, like, as he is like preparing for this and working through his fear, Switch and the other second are going through their negotiation, like setting everything up. In addition to that, who is there watching the events in this situation? Anais and Dorian Mataro, as well as Sir Elamas Redgrave, again, shows up. This knight that we've heard about that's funding Valka's expedition is there. Gilliam begins talking to Hadrian, like trying to goad him and ask him if he's scared, which is against the rules, right? Like they're not allowed to talk to each other until the duel starts. And immediately they both get called out for jawing at each other a little bit by the referee in the middle of it. He calls Gilliam a gargoyle. The gargoyle himself wore high boots and black trousers, even in the leather of his jerkin was black. And without his heavy robes to disguise him, the myriad imperfections of his form screamed for attention. The pronounced hunch, his uneven legs, and the way he carried himself as if he teetered on the edge of some abyss. I wanted to bring up the idea of Gilliam as a gargoyle as a beautiful image, like a genius image.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because gargoyles are meant to be these grotesque figures that are on the outside of buildings and churches to protect the building and church from evil spirits, right? So Gilliam as that gargoyle is the gargoyle for the chantry, right? He's protecting them and doing his job, pushing back against threats like Hadrian, evil spirits like Hadrian, of challenging them, right? Genius imagery on
that's really, really, really good writing.
Hadrian in the moment is clearly confident that, I mean, he's trained by one of the best, like he's trained all his life. He's not wearing shoes. He mentions he's not wearing shoes. So he's going into this like it's a sparring match, like he's done thousands and thousands of times. But I do want to bring about that conversation. Is that not only the fact, like he's mentioning the fact that Gilliam in particular, there's no way in Hadrian's mind that his physical imperfections could make him even close to the level that Hadrian is fighting at. And that's a prideful sort of thing. But I wanted to circle to the idea of the fact that he's not wearing shoes. That's an indication that it's something he only does when he's training, right? Is that an indication to you that he's not taking this seriously? So as somebody who's been in training, like high level competitive training for the grappling event and actually going to the grappling event, talk about the differences in like how you sort of approach that. Because it seems to me in this moment that like the fact that he's barefoot means that he's play fighting almost.
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure. I will say, I don't know enough about fencing, but I will say, like one thing that comes into my mind is, for example, in wrestling, you wear shoes in wrestling and you don't wear shoes in jiu-jitsu. And that changes things you're able to do in either sport. One of the things that's most easily noticeable is when you have shoes, you have traction to shoot for lower body takedowns with a speed that you can't achieve barefoot just because of the friction that you can generate with the shoes. So it's an interesting question. There's, I think, maybe more dexterity with bare feet, but there's explosiveness with shoed feet. It's possible. I can't recall actually if Hadrian learns to fight barefoot for the dexterity purpose of being able to move, be light on the feet. I can't recall, but there could be a mechanical reason. It's also possible. I mean, in this part of the story, he is overconfident. He feels very confident going into this thing. Oh yeah, I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to get first blood. I'm going to end this fight really quickly. He's sort of thinking to himself like how skilled he is and how he's just going to like walk in here and do this. So it's possible he's not taking it seriously enough. It may be the case he also thinks it's an environment where he can function well on bare feet, but who knows?
Yeah. Both of them received swords from this referee, this plebeian who is responsible for giving them and making sure that, they're not bringing their own swords in the fight because they could cheat that way, right? He's like testing the swords, making sure the edges are sharp enough. He makes notes. This is the guy who's going to be judging who wins and who loses ultimately. Hadrian turns to Switch and he says, like, I'm going to get first blood. But then he's starting to feel like maybe this was a mistake. Like he's off kilter here. And part of that is Gilliam putting on this fencing glove that has wear on it, that indicates that he has been practicing and has like training. He's not this untrained person that's here.
If we remember from the start of the book, the reason, Hadrian's training at the start is that dueling is important for the Palatine to settle stuff. So it's not surprising. We maybe think of Gilliam as like disabled or something, but like we don't really actually know what Gilliam is capable of. And I get the impression of this like worn fencing glove is almost like walking onto the mats and you're about to spar with a guy with cauliflower here, and you're like, oh crap! Like this is not like there's a subtle thing that tells a lot, and Hadrian needs to like sort of rapidly recalibrate here. Like this could be more dangerous than he's letting on.
And that's part of where the anxiety is coming from. The other part of it is too that he feels out of place with this formality and these forms of being Palatine again. Again, another indication of him putting on this old identity that he hasn't had for quite some time, and in this very high stress moment. The rules are then reviewed over again. Whoever gets first blood, they get to choose if the fight ends. If it doesn't get ended, they fight on until the other person cannot fight. Gilliam turns to Hadrian and says, have you confessed? I'll hear your sins before you die, in this very villain-esque monologue as they begin fighting. And Hadrian immediately realizes that Gilliam is way faster than he predicted him to be.
I wanted to take a moment to comment. I remember distinctly the tension I felt in this moment reading it for the first time.
Yep.
There's this suspense. It's really good writing, because the suspense I felt was not Hadrian gonna die. Hadrian's writing this account. I mean, like, I'm not feeling that, but the suspense is Hadrian has to get the first hit.
Yep.
Otherwise, this is gonna get, so like, it just, the stakes are super high for all of the circumstances that the author has put us in here. Like, there's a lot riding on Hadrian not just getting cut down, but Hadrian getting this right. And it's a difficult thing to get right. And there's going to be a lot of potential costs if he doesn't. So it's really good writing to put us in a situation where we have to feel tension and suspense for a author that we presumably think survives this fight because he's writing the story. Just, it speaks to how good Rocchio is.
Yep. And that tension escalates as he realizes not only is he much faster, but he actually executes technique really well. Like, his shots are straight. He is pushing and taking the initiative in this fight. And very quickly, Hadrian realizes this is not going to be as easy as I thought it was going to be. He says on the page too, pride cometh before destruction, which is another Gibsonism that is ringing in his ear. As Gilliam advances, Hadrian bruises him with his hand or something, and Gilliam steps back. That doesn't count as first blood. First blood means sword cutting blood, from what we understand.
Yep.
Gilliam remains on the offensive, attacking, and Hadrian is just riposting and parrying, trying to use his better swordsmanship and better ability to get him, and almost does, but Gilliam dodge rolls, like in freaking FromSoft games, away.
Yeah.
And Hadrian was not able to nick him with this planned riposte or whatever. On the page, he admits that, like, and he's getting this in this adrenaline dump moment, that his anger, his repressed feelings for Valka, they're all coming up because, like, oh fuck, that's what got me here. It's not because I had this self-righteousness. It's like my own stupid emotions got me in the situation that I'm here today, and now I'm feeling the effects of it because this is crazy, and his mind is racing, and he's not quite feeling like himself. Like, there's fighting and there is fighting. He says on the page, he doesn't feel as comfortable. And if we look at the way that the author writes Hadrian's dueling in advance of this story, Hadrian is not fainting, right? That's a big part of Hadrian's whole thing. We haven't heard him, and we don't see him faint on this page at all. Whereas Gilliam is being sharper. That indicates to me that Hadrian might be telegraphing his blows to Gilliam unknowingly, because he's sort of off kilter.
I think also there's fighting is sort of this commentary on the difference, sort of a subjective one, but it does exist. I can think back to my experience, like doing combat sports, rolled with a lot of folks. And if you're rolling with someone, there's a difference between rolling and rolling with someone. And like, it's a subjective, like, experience difference. Like, most of the time you're sparring, you're fighting, even if it's like a competition match, there's a difference between that and the one where you're kind of rolling and someone catches an elbow to the face on accident, and now you are like fighting because people are angry and things get sloppy and kind of brutal, and there's something that changes. In this fight is different for Hadrian because of that, like, nastiness that I think is a part of this. This is
that makes a lot more sense,
because he's been in life or death situations, but I don't think he's been fighting someone that hates him before. There's a big difference there.
Here it is. It's actually the inverse, right? Normally he's the calm, cool, collected, I'm going to goad you to Crispin, right?
Yeah.
In this case, he's the more emotional one in this situation, where his emotions are getting the better of him than they would before, because of his anger at Gilliam and because of his feelings for Valka.
Yeah.
That makes total sense, and why he would be fighting different, right? If he's goading Crispin and getting him to do what he wants, he's using technique and feints and cleverness to get the better of him, ultimately to set up the big strike. Whereas now, if he's angry and just being more straightforward, then he's just overhead, right, overhead, left.
There's just doubt in him too, I think.
Yeah.
That's sort of plaguing his ability. There's no confidence like he usually has in fighting. And it makes a difference for him. Yeah.
And he notes that like he's really focused on getting first blood. Like the only way he's going to be able to redeem himself to Valka is if he gets this first blood. And he never sees the strike that cuts him on the arm. And the only thing he feels is the pain and the blood that's pouring out as his shirt on his arm gets cut. And the wound, he notes, is not dangerous, but because he loses first blood, Gilliam has essentially won the beginning of the duel. Round 1 goes to Gilliam, and Gilliam gets to now determine the fate of how this duel will shape up. Gilliam, of course...
Which is bad.
Yeah.
Which is really bad.
Yeah, of course, Gilliam, being the villain he is in our story, is not satisfied with first blood and is going to push this on further. Hadrian in this moment realizes that he is actually tired, that this sparring session, or that this fight so far is taken more out of him than he would have expected. And he laments the idea that he didn't keep his discipline when he was living in the house. He didn't train nearly as much as he should have. He was too busy going to Valka's and drinking wine. And this has had an effect on his ability to perform here. He's not as sharp as he was when he was in Colosso. He does mention when Gilliam says, no, like, I'm not satisfied. I love this line. Damn my talent for making enemies. It's a beautiful line of like, why am I so good at making enemies?
It sounds like something would be in Star Wars or something as they're about to start the lightsaber duel again.
Han Solo would say something like that.
Yeah.
I did want to read this moment on 423. Time narrowed before me. The futures ahead of me thinning, reducing from vague quantum smear of potential to a single pair of doors. Through one I stood above the mute's body, a bloodied sword in hand. Through the other, our positions were reversed. I slammed my sword up, stepping in and to the right to block a charge and angle out of the way as Gilliam redoubled his attack. What the two doors quantum smear? What? This sounds like some of the weird time stuff that we were dealing with at the beginning of the book early on, but it could just be a nice way of saying like there's only two outcomes to this duel potentially. But like,
yeah.
Is that not weird? He sees two doors,
it's weird.
One of which is him standing over Gilliam's dead body, and the other is Gilliam sitting over his dead body.
Yeah, it stood out to me too. I was like, what is this? I don't know. We'll pin it. Interesting thing. I don't think we've seen Hadrian fight to the death before.
Yeah.
So it's possible, just like, we're seeing like the stakes of the situation put next to getting it right or something. I
get some of the same vibes as like some of the really early on stuff of like, did I see a C. Elson ship or did I not see a C. Elson ship and my memory is just messed up? Or like, I swear I saw Gibson's nose cut before that. Like it's giving similar vibes.
Yeah, I hear that. I agree.
Gilliam knows he's got the upper hand currently and he's jawing at him to try and get him off kilter even more. And he's like, oh, it's brave of you to challenge a cripple. Yeah, you big man challenge a cripple. And Hadrian at that moment starts to begin to take this seriously, but not too seriously. This is where his training is revealing its ugly head. What was the number one thing that Felix had criticized him for when he was training with Crispin at the very beginning of the book?
It was not taking chances to strike his opponent, like not having the resolve to cut
finishing the fight, right? Like specifically finishing the fight. He always can't stop short of the thing that he needed to do to win. He played with his food a little bit. We get that sort of image here. He stabs Gilliam in the thigh and then the hip. He hits bone. Gilliam cries. Hadrian sees an opening at this moment to end this fight, but he backs off like he used to with Crispin. He is incapable in this moment where his blood isn't up to finish the fight. He has another opening where he could have slashed and hit him in the chest and he doesn't take it. And for Hadrian, this is sort of a watershed moment for him because he hasn't killed anybody in his life up to this moment. He doesn't want to kill Gilliam in this way, but he's actually wounding him more and making him suffer. And Anais calls him out in the crowd and says like, hey, you're playing with him. Like you need to finish this. Like this isn't becoming of a Palatine like you. Everybody in the crowd recognizes he could have ended the fight 2 or 3 times already. On 424, he says, long have I sat in my cell here at Colchis without writing a word. So long that my candles guttered out. The nights here are long, and I do not sleep as I once did. In the end, I sent one of the novitiates out to fetch me new light, that I might work through the dawn. Perhaps there is some meaning there, some lesson.
I was just going to say, it feels like there's like This section struck me because it feels like as Hadrian is getting to this moment, it's like the universe shuts his writing down and forces him to pause at this moment. It feels like we're crossing some kind of threshold. It's like a somber, serious moment. And so I think that this is narratively and just literally the author telling us to pause and focus on this moment and try to draw meaning from what we're about to read. So moving forward, we'll pay really close attention.
100% accurate. He is moving into something that he cannot take back. Gilliam is filled with rage, which is blinding him. It says rage moved him, blinded him, and nearly blinded me. So fast did that sword move. But his haste and his fury made him sloppy. And again, he's getting more opportunities to kill Gilliam in this moment, and he's just not taking them. He just cannot take the shot, which is such a dichotomy between the guy who kills billions of people and the guy who can't kill the one guy that he has to kill to live in this scenario. And he reminds us of what the Stalin quote is that we heard early in like Distant Thunder, I believe. A single death is a tragedy. A million deaths is a statistic, right? That's the thing. He stabs Gilliam in the hip again. He's just like torturing the guy in front of everybody. It's just not, this is really, really ugly.
There's a cruelty in his lack of conviction here, right? Like it would be more merciful to have courage in this moment, as hard as it is.
And he does not. Hadrian does not have the courage to do that.
Yeah.
On 425, you read this part.
Sometimes there is no climax. A thing happens and it is over. Gilliam lunged again. I parried, extended into the riposte. In a simple motion, my blade swept across my chest, point still aimed forward to brush the wild thrust aside. I stepped forward, tucking my right shoulder to bring the point line with Gilliam's ribs, metal grinding on metal, on leather, on bone, and then red blossomed there, black against the black of his jerkin, and the breath went out with it in a wordless groan. Red and black, I thought, my colors. This moment is, first of all, just the writing on this is crazy. The moment is Hadrian killing a man for the first time and narratively shows us his true colors, right? There's this... Yeah, so it's a cross of literally what's happening, but also like, is this like the moment when he crosses some line that he doesn't get to uncross anymore, right? Before this, we have Hadrian, defending the ethic of killing Gilliam or something like that, or taking Gilliam off the table, knocking him down a peg at the minimum. And here we have the reality of the situation. We have this person who is hesitant to kill, hesitant to strike, hesitant to finish the job, and something has changed now. At the beginning of the story, we asked ourselves this question of, how is the kid who can't even strike his brother with a training sword going to be the person that ends this war? And the answer might be because he crossed this line.
Yeah.
And I think that's in part what the author and our narrator is telling us to pause on here. It's a really big moment for Hadrian, and we'll have to be thinking about this moment moving forward and the implications of it, and see what does he look like in future life and death combats. Does he hesitate anymore? Or is he changed permanently by this moment?
He's nicked a lung, and he's stabbed through one of Gilliam's, punctured a lung. So Gilliam's internally bleeding and suffocating and dying on the floor. And as he dies, it takes a while. He's choking on his own blood. But with every word he has, he's trying to convince the Mataros not to listen to Hadrian in this moment. And strangely, now that we talk about it, he's kind of right. He's the first to die at the hand of who we know who will become the Sun Eater, and he will not be the last. And that's the threshold, like you mentioned, that we've crossed.
Yeah.
He just sits kneeling beside him as he dies, just like, I guess, trying to comfort him, or at least being there with him so he doesn't die alone, which is kind of strangely noble in this whole like ignoble fight that he wasn't merciful in.
Yeah.
And he changes.
What a brutal way to go.
Yeah.
Wondering if the way that Gilliam dies motivates him to be more decisive and cruel in the future in his violence, so that this doesn't happen. There's like an in-betweenness that's almost worse. Like if you decisively are at peace or you're decisively at war, at least you're committed to something. The in-between of the unsure, so you have some person bleeding out slowly on the floor, is almost the worst of all outcomes. At least if you were committed to one action
or convicted,
it wouldn't have happened, or it would have been over.
Right. And that's where we end, as a centurion orders Hadrian to come with her. And the duel is over. Gilliam Vas is dead. Hadrian has won. And Valka's honor is restored. But is their relationship? We'll find out as we continue always forward.
And always down.
And we will see you folks next time.
See you folks.
Devil's Rest Book Club is Cameron Elston and Drew Welty. Today's episode discussed chapters 58, 59, and 60 of Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio, copyright 2018. Empire of Silence was originally published by Daw Books on July 3rd, 2018. Quality editing and original music by Cameron Elston. Find us on YouTube. Contact us at devilsrestbookclub@gmail.com. Devil's Rest Book Club is a production of Disquiet Pods. This episode copyright 2026, Cameron Elston and Drew Welty. Thanks for joining us, and remember, rage is blindness.